Hey, what's up? This is Chosen, and in this video, we're going to be going over the Blood Necromancer. I have played around with it and done it here on my main class for a little bit, and I want to showcase a build that you could consider trying out if you're looking to get into the Blood Necromancer style. It's a lot of fun, cranks out a lot of damage, has a lot of tankiness. The footage you're seeing right here, I believe the mobs were like 25 levels above me or something when I was testing it, so you can definitely do pretty well in Nightmare Dungeons with this, and I want to showcase this, talk about the build, the gear, the skill tree, some Paragon stuff, and everything you need to know when you're getting into trying out the Blood Necromancer. Let's get into it. Alrighty, now I am working on a video comparing the Bone Necro and the Blood Necro, so that will be coming out very soon on the channel. I've played both of them, I've built both of them as my main build, and I want to lay that out for you to help you choose between the two builds, but I also wanted to get the build guide ASAP out there for people that are looking for what goes into the Blood Necromancer and my thoughts on it and all of that. So starting with the gear first, we'll talk about some of the different roles you're looking for on your stuff. So for the helm, ideally we want cooldown reduction and maximum life, and then also this build does utilize the blood orbs, so getting things like damage for 4 seconds after picking up a blood orb would be great, and maximum essence is always welcome. Then there is a chest armor called the Blood Artisan's Cuirass, and this can be all right, especially I tried the version that pairs with the Bone Spirit because it does help you out a little bit with doing a little bit of damage and generating a little bit of essence, and I did have this chest laying around, so I thought it would be fun to try out that variant of it. You can try it out with or without it and see if you like the Bone Spirit flying around version of it, which you'll see when we get into the skill tree. But if not, you're just looking for things like maximum life, damage reduction from both close and distance, and then also this build does utilize life and fortify, so you want to get both of those stats when you can, because you're going to be fortified pretty consistent and your damage is going to be scaling with life, so you do want to get that where you can on your different slots. And then on our gloves, we're going to be looking for things like the usual suspects on gloves: crit chance, attack speed. This build has insane attack speed. It's one of the highest attack speeds in the game. And then also lucky hit to generate resource, and lucky hit chance would be great on your gloves. For the pants, it's pretty typical, but we do want to make sure we get life on our pants, and then a bunch of damage reduction rolls. So things like close and distance and fortified going to work great on that slot as well. For the boots, we want essence cost reduction and movement speed, and then movement speed for 4 seconds after an elite would be fine. And also the build is going to scale pretty well with willpower, so if you can get a good amount of willpower on this build, that will help you out as well. And if you're not familiar with why willpower is so sought after in the blood version of the Necro, it's because usually the main source of your damage is going to be getting those huge overpower waves of damage on the screen, and willpower is going to help you scale up your overpower damage. And then sliding on over to the jewelry, on the amulet, essence cost reduction, cooldown reduction, corpse skills, and then tides of blood passive, things like that would be great. Now usually in most builds, the amulet is going to be the hardest thing to find and get the optimal roll on it, so don't feel bad if your amulet isn't perfect. It will do just fine if you just get a decent one in there. For the rings, we want overpower damage, resource generation, crit chance, and lucky hit chance. Things like that would be great on our ring slots. Then for the weapons, we're looking for overpower damage, but what's really cool about this version of the Necromancer on the blood build is you don't have to go after those usual suspects like crit damage and vulnerable damage and things like that. You can build a little bit of a different style here because we're utilizing the overpower mechanic. And then for the offhand, I absolutely love the Woodless Wall. I think it's one of the cooler items they've put in the game. It's a lot of fun to have those constant bone storms popping off, giving you damage reduction and also crit chance. So I really love utilizing the Lidless Wall if you can find one. It is a little bit rare. I'm like level 90 and I've only found one, I believe. So if you're not able to get the Lidless Wall, don't feel bad. You're looking for cooldown reduction, lucky hit, crit chance, essence cost reduction, and things like that on your offhand slot. And then for discussing some of the aspects, there's a lot of different aspects that make sense and seem like they would synergize in this build. And then there's also a lot of different ways to put it together. So you're going to feel a little bit overwhelmed maybe when you're trying to mix and match your aspects, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. But I'll talk about some of the highlights and things you really want to make sure and watch out for. So over here on the jewelry, you've got the Gore Quills, and Bloodlance will consume blood orbs to also conjure lances from them, and each additional blood lance deals increased damage while prioritizing unlanced enemies. So that's amazing here within this build. And then the aspect of Rothma's Chosen is whenever your skills overpower, you gain up to 50% attack speed for 4 seconds. You're going to almost be able to keep this up permanently, so you want to get that bonus somewhere like your amulet where you can really scale up the bonus of that. And then Potent Blood, when at full life, blood orbs will grant essence. This isn't like mandatory because you don't really have a ton of essence issues with this build, so you could maybe play around with something else, but that is an amazing source of constant essence generation. And then on our weapon, we have the Hungry Blood. When Blood Lance hits an enemy that's already lanced, it has up to a 23% chance to fire a Blood Lance for free at a new enemy and just constantly keep chaining. So that is definitely one that goes on the weapon super well. And also the Exploding Mist right here is going to help you cycle through and keep the cooldown of your Blood Mist, helping you rotate super fast because it will constantly be lowering that based on corpse detonation around it when you cast it. And if you're doing the lidless wall version, something like Shielding Storm can be great because you'll basically have Bone Storm up permanently and you'll just constantly be popping off with all of these shields, and it makes this build super tanky while you're up there in the fray constantly. For our gems, remember the build is going to be scaling a lot with those rubies because of life and then overpower damage in the weapon. So remember I said the weapon mechanic is a little bit different. You don't have to worry about getting those emeralds that you would typically get in most Diablo 4 builds. We can throw in the overpower damage ruby there in our weapon slot, and then in the armor we obviously want to go with life because we're looking to scale that up to work with our overpower. Then for the season 1 mechanics, the hearts right here, obviously one of the best hearts in season 1 is going to be this walking near a corpse automatically detonating, and that is going to work with our corpse tendrils right here, so you definitely want to take advantage of that. It will make the build flow a lot better and be a lot more fun to play. And then you can do the barber here to store up the damage, and it can be a little bit wonky though if you're trying to like speed farm or something. Sometimes in some builds and play styles there are better choices out there, like just going with damage reduction or something like that, but it is a pretty solid heart, especially if you're trying to push up, because you can start storing a bunch of damage and then have it blow up. And then over here on the third slot, you can go with the auto. You've got a little bit of flex here. You can go with the auto decrepify because we do have things that synergize with our curses, so it's kind of nice to keep that up when you're jumping on packs. And a lot of times with this blood style, you're kind of up in there, so you will get value out of the decrepify. But there are some other hearts that would work fine and perform great as well. And then for our different skill choices here, we want to go with Hemorrhage as our default, because what this is going to do is help us ramp up our attack speed and keep those blood orbs generating on the map. And we do get a lot of value out of synergizing those blood orbs here within the build. The thing we're going to be spamming a lot is our Blood Lance, so we'll throw that on something like our right click. And then our 4 utility abilities, we want Corpse Tendrils on there for sure to be utilizing all of that auto procking that we get from the Malignant Heart. That's going to scale with that. We want to be cursing everything we can and placing Decrepify to also help us lower the cooldown of Blood Mist right here, which is going to help us get that overpower, constantly giving us the cooldown, and then also leaving behind corpses for us to work with. And this ability right here also makes the build insanely tanky, because this is going to be up very consistently and you can just constantly kind of go in and out of Blood Mist whenever you're in trouble or you need to reposition a little bit. So it is an amazing get out of jail free card for us here within the build. And then Bone Storm here, this works great with the Lidless Wall, and we can keep it up basically permanent while we are clearing, going to give us awesome damage reduction and crit chance, while also just that passive AoE damage constantly popping off. And then in the style, we are not going to be utilizing pets, so we would go ahead and sacrifice our Skeletal Warriors with the one that gives us critical strike chance, and then we would go down here on the Bone Sacrifice that gives us overpower damage, and then up on the top one for the Golem that will give us attack speed scaling. Now, as we dive into the skill tree, there is a lot of different ways that you can kind of move points around and play around with this build. There's a few different versions of the blood style of Necro, so definitely play around and try different things out, but I'll show you the version that I've got laid out for you right here on Hemorrhage. We're going to be going up here to the enhanced version and then over to the right, because Hemorrhage will gain attack speed, and we want that here in our build for sure, because this is going to help us keep generating more and more blood orbs when we're using our basic, and you can really crank those out here once you've got that stacked up. Then down here in core, it is super simple. We want to pick up the maximum essence, and then we also have pretty good essence management in this style of play, so don't feel bad about taking imperfectly balanced here to make it cost a little bit more and do a little bit more damage. Then for the Blood Lance version, we want to come up here to the top, where after casting Blood Lance 6 times, your next cast of Blood Lance is a guaranteed overpower and spawns a blood orb. So that's going to give you a very consistent output of big damage all over the screen, while also helping you generate more and more blood orbs. And we will also slide down here to Hued Flesh, so we can constantly generate more and more corpses at the target's location. It's going to be doubled against bosses, and this build can struggle a little bit with boss fights. It's not like, struggle might not be the best word, but maybe be a little bit annoying. It's not like, it's just kind of wonky how it can work versus bosses. The blood style here is amazing when you've got a lot of stuff around, but in a boss fight it can sometimes feel like a little bit of a slog, so we do want to be generating corpses to help out with that for sure. Then down here we do want to take Blood Mist and get as many points in that as we can, because we want to get that cooldown lowered as best we can. And then we want to slide up over here to the left, where Blood Mist is going to leave behind a corpse every second. Over here it does fortify you, and the build does utilize fortify, but I love getting orbs and corpses out there on the map as often as possible, because it's going to help the build flow a lot better. And then right down here on the south edge of this section with Grim Harvest and Fueled by Death, where you get essence based on consuming a corpse and then also damage after consuming a corpse, can be very good. So I would say you can choose between doing the Bone Spirit style, especially if you have that chest. Remember the chest that pairs with it right here, where it's going to be constantly spawning a Bone Spirit, because it says every 5 or so blood orbs that you consume, you're going to send out a free Bone Spirit to deal damage based on your current life percentage. So that is going to give you a lot of just kind of passive damage and essence generation. But if you don't have that chest and you don't want to play that style, go ahead and remove the points right here in the Bone Spirit, and then you can try out something like this, where you scale up your damage or essence based on Grim Harvest and also Fueled by Death. But I do kind of like playing around with that bonus, because it also enhances down here under the Dreadful to give you 30 essence generation over 4 seconds. So what that does is it's not a burst of 30 essence, it's essence generation. So it's just going to help you really flow and synergize very well. But I can hear an argument for the other play style as well. So especially if you don't have the chest, try out the other style and see which one you like more. And then as we slide down to the curses section, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty similar to the bone setup. We're going to be taking Decrepify and making sure that we get the cooldown. So when we Decrepify a whole room of a couple elite packs, we're constantly lowering our cooldowns to be able to cycle through Blood Mist as often as possible. And we do have a Decrepify on the heart if we want it, but we get a much bigger area with Decrepify on our bar. So I personally like to put it on the bar. Some people don't. They like to just use the heart and then only have Decrepify on things they're super close on. So again, that's going to be a choice of what you want to go with personally, and then you can replace Decrepify on your bar if you would like. And then since I personally play it with that bigger Decrepify area that I can more control, I like taking Amplify damage to get that 12x increased damage on cursed enemies. Then down here, we're going to be spending a lot of points because we've got all of these blood passives. And then I also was talking about that Bone Spirit style. And then down in the next section, we're going to be spending a lot of points because we've got all of these blood passives right here, and they're all pretty solid. But I would only put 1 point into the Gruesome Mending, and I would max out these other 2 on the left. We don't have to worry about this one on the right because its blood orbs also heal your minions. We're not using minions in this build, so just put in the points here on the left and then slide up here to Drain Vitality, because that will help us be a lot more consistent with our fortifying and all of that. And then the Corpse Tendrils is going to be a little bit different in this variant. Usually, like on the Bone style, you're taking this over here because you want the constant vulnerable popping off when you synergize with the heart, constantly popping off Corpse Tendrils. But on this one, we want to go up here because we don't need vulnerable damage in this build. We're playing it a little bit different. So we want to come up to the Blighted Corpse Tendrils, which is going to give us blood orbs instead of vulnerable. And then I already talked about the Bone Spirit. This is one you can kind of pick and choose. And if you don't want to go with that, you would go up here to the Grim Harvest and Fueled by Death. But I did kind of have fun playing around with this one here, so I went that route. Now down here in the next section, we're going to be coming on over here to get a lot of attack speed. Remember, the build scales very well with attack speed to get more and more blood orbs and all of that. So so that is a fun one to get there, an inspiring leader. And then obviously we're going to be taking Bone Storm and getting both of the enhancement points on that, along with maxing out the Memento Mori, because we are getting a lot of sacrifice bonus without those pets, and we want to scale those up. It's going to help our vulnerable damage and our attack speed, so it's very impactful to put those points there, and you'll have to put 1 point in standalone to get there. And then, not surprising, we're going to slide down to the Blood Key passive of Rothma's Vigor, which is going to increase your maximum life by 10%, and that's going to help us scale our damage because we scale with life. And then we're also going to be getting more consistent overpowers, and we want those as often as possible because overpower is how we're scaling up the big hits of our damage. Okay, now for the Paragon section here. I know this can get a little bit boring and a little bit wordy, but work with me there. I'm going to try to go quick and just cover kind of the basics of what you want to know on the Paragon board. And if you want to pull this up on your end to follow it node for node, you can do that. I always link to my builds down below in the pinned comment and stuff like that here on the video. But the main thing is we want to take advantage of some of these glyphs here like Blood Drinker, because it is going to not only help us scale the magic nodes around us, which we do get a decent amount of value from magic nodes in this build, but look at that, Blood Orbs fortify you, so it's going to help us keep that up a little bit more consistently. And then also Amplify is going to grant bonus to magic nodes as well, while enemies affected by curse skills take increased damage from you, and we're going to keep that up very often with things like Decrepify. And then we've got Territorial, where we're going to help to scale up our damage to close targets. You're going to be up there in the fray with this blood version of the build, so that's going to be great. And then we'll slide on over to the Sacrificial Glyph, where it's going to grant a bonus to magic nodes while also helping us scale up while we have no active minions, which we will not in this build. And then we also take advantage of the Dominate Glyph, which this is the most obvious one because it's going to help us scale up our overpower damage. Like I talked about, willpower synergizing with overpower damage, and this glyph here in Dominate is going to really help you do that. It's also got an additional bonus of when you overpower an enemy, all damage they take from you and your minions is increased by 12% for 5 seconds. So this is an amazing must-take glyph here in Dominate. So that is why we put this Dominate glyph up here on the top left in the Scent of Death board, because the Scent of Death board is going to be a great slot to put that Dominate glyph. Look at this. We've got the 2 rare nodes of willpower that are in range once it's level 15, and then all of these other willpowers. The willpower icon is going to be that like person with the pyramid behind them or the triangle or whatever, and we've got so many of those here along with the 2 rare nodes. But yeah, if you want the full layout and the full walkthrough, like I said, that Paragon board will be down there for you to follow it node by node as you're going along if you would like. So yeah, this build is super fun and super strong. As you can see in the clip up above here, the mobs are level 109. And I know it's zoomed in a little bit, but I believe I was like level 81 or 82 when I was doing this. So anyway, I mean, the mobs are like 25 plus levels above me, and I'm able to clear it just fine. I was able to basically speed farm this nightmare dungeon that I was in where the mobs were 25 levels above me. And I think I died maybe once, and it was because of my own fault messing something up. So the build definitely has a lot of potential, and some of the advantages of it are that the attack speed is super insane. You have pretty good essence generation. You don't really have a ton of essence issues with this, and you don't have to worry about some of the things that you worry about in the bone style, like having to scale with a bunch of vulnerable damage and all of that. Plus, you are very, very tanky because you're going to be having all of that fortify and scaling up your maximum life so high. Plus, you have those constant blood mists, so whenever you're in trouble, you just blood mist for a couple seconds and then kind of gather your breath and you're good to go again, and that will be cycling through constantly. So yeah, it would mean a lot to earn your sub today if you enjoy daily Diablo 4 content, and if you're going to be playing the Blood Necro, I hope you enjoy it, and I will link to the build down below if you would like to pull it up on your end. And then I'm going to get to work on comparing the blood style versus the bone style. Now that I've done a build guide on each, I want to talk about helping people choose what are the advantages and disadvantages of each style of Necromancer, bone versus blood, and have that discussion here in a video coming very soon. So I appreciate all of you. Have a good rest of your day. Peace.